China warship sunk as warships after help Asean in South China Sea. During a long war with China, the US Navy probably wouldn't be able to work fast enough to fix or replace the ships the Chinese sank or damaged. That's not alarmism. Rather, it's the cool conclusion of two rather boring studies by industrial and military groups in recent months. After decades of government neglect, American shipyards barely can build and repair the ships the US fleet already has, to say nothing of the additional ships it would need quickly to keep fighting a determined, high-tech foe with major industrial resources of its own. Heart rates surely spiked across Washington, D.C. on Wednesday when Paul McCleary, a reporter for Breaking Defense, got his hands on a draft report by US Marine Corps Commandant David Berger. Berger, a major military reformer, has been studying the U.S. shipbuilding landscape as part of his wide-ranging effort to transform the Marine Corps into a lighter, more mobile force that can range across the Pacific Ocean, occupying small islands in order to fire long-range anti-ship missiles at Chinese vessels. If the United States and China got into a serious, long-lasting fight, the American fleet would start to shrink as ships got sunk or damaged, Berger warned. The Chinese fleet, on the other hand, would be in a better position to make good its losses. Replacing ships lost in combat will be problematic, inasmuch as our industrial base has shrunk, while peer adversaries have expanded their shipbuilding capacity, Berger wrote. In an extended conflict, the United States will be on the losing end of a production race reversing the advantage we had in World War II when we last fought a peer competitor. For all its import, Berger's study isn't revealing anything new. A January report from the Virginia-based National Defense Industrial Association stated essentially the same thing. America's, according to the NDIA, the U.S. shipbuilding industry has just enough capacity to cover a doubling of its workload. Any increase above 100% of its current work would exceed its capacity. To put it into context, the industry's current workload is the result of the roughly 10 new warships the Navy annually has ordered in recent years. In other words, the big shipyards the fleet counts on to assemble its major warships could, in a pinch, build around 20 new ships at a time instead of just 10. That is to say, the Navy could, in theory and in a reasonable span of time, replace or repair just 10 ships. If Chinese forces sink more than those 10 American vessels, the U.S. fleet will begin to shrink. How likely is the Chinese military to take out 10 American warships in 2015? The California think tank RAND gamed out war scenarios in the Western Pacific. The think tank estimated that a single barrage of around 50 DF-21D anti-ship ballistic missiles could take out a single American ship. China possesses hundreds of DF-21Ds and other anti-ship ballistic missiles. And don't forget China's fleet of around 70 submarines. RAND estimated that, by 2017, China's subs combined would get around 4 torpedo or missile shots per week at any American aircraft carrier sailing in the Western Pacific. Add up those risks and others, and it's not hard to see how, over the course of weeks or months, the Chinese Navy could inflict serious damage on the U.S. Navy, damage that could result in a major industrial mobilization in the United States. The question is just how quickly, and to what extent, American shipyards could expand to replace losses. To be clear, industrial capacity and wartime force projection are complex subjects that defy easy explanation in short surveys. And there are additional factors in the Navy's ability to replace losses, such as the large number of recently decommissioned warships that the fleet keeps in reserve and which, in an emergency, could recommission for frontline service. But it's hard to dispute that, for a major maritime power, the United States in 2020 lacks adequate shipbuilding infrastructure. As recently as the late 1970s, the U.S. shipbuilding industry was thriving, thanks in large part to subsidies and financing guarantees that were part of President Richard Nixon's economic and military platforms. There were, at the time, 22 large shipyards in the United States. President Ronald Reagan withdrew the subsidies and guarantees in the early 1980s. The shipbuilding industry in the United States collapsed and, in the 5 years that followed, employment fell by a third and the number of active shipyards was reduced by 40%. Tim Colton and LeVar Hunsinger explained in a 2002 report for the Center for Naval Analyses in Virginia. The industry further shrank following the end of the Cold War and the subsequent decline in the U.S. defense spending. Meanwhile, countries willing to heavily subsidize their shipbuilding industries, Japan, South Korea, and China, came to dominate the international market for large commercial vessels. America's own shipyards soon were building only military ships and smaller commercial vessels.